reservation between We're like far away.
Yeah, probably nice sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Want to be more distant.
Yeah.
Political climate.
Yeah, I just dropped on a little bit.
I think we have.
We don't have anybody.
Otherwise, I mean, I have to walk to the two behind as much as possible, and then I take 3 stops, and then I walk about 15 minutes here.
Thank God you have.
I almost drift.
So why don't you drive to Burlington? I feel like even that's a bad commute, but I feel like we need.
Sarah, are we good? Did you want to wait?
I think it's just like get a certain Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be able to make it, at least now.
Okay, all right. So I hope everybody had a good, recharging lunch. I love seeing the conversations going on and more bonding. As hokey and corny as this sounds, and I love to throw a little corny in there once in a while, but I love, it's one thing as a coach, and we have a few other coaches here today. We do all these videos, we do all these social media posts, which is cool, which is needed. Really too. But there's nothing better than being in a room and bringing people together and connecting and learning from each other. And any chance you get, this is just a little sidebar communication suggestion that fits the theme of today, but any chance you get to bring people together to talk a little bit more. And I know it's not always practical or feasible to do it in person, but personally, I feel that I come across better in person than I do online. I'm still going to always be doing videos and all these Instagram stories, but I just think that my content and the way I deliver definitely is a little bit more powerful in person than online. But then there's the other, so hence why I want to do more of these, but also to bring people together any chance that we do that. I definitely was always that person, that personality type that when I'd be out with friends, I would get a lot more satisfaction and value if I would see like 2 of my friends who didn't know each other yet, they could make, connect, and talk. Like I'd be standing in the background happy to see that stuff going on. So, but that's an awareness thing. That's a self-awareness thing that you can bring out in so many different ways as you interact every day. Okay, we have a couple of new people joining us this afternoon. So we had a couple of people who were here this morning who had to leave and couldn't stay. But why don't we get a couple introductions out of the way and introduce yourself. And I know you have some colleagues here, but also some non-colleagues. And I know you're here because it's offered right at Mendix, of course. But what's something I had everybody this morning share, like a nugget or a story from their background that would lead you to say, this is something that's impacted my communication and my growth in that area. Like something that happened in your life, and then you may need to think about this for a second, but something that happened that has some kind of a bearing on your communication style and your ability to communicate these things.
I need to think about that first.
Okay. While you guys think.
Why don't you
You've got an advantage.
Welcome. Time to stew on it over here.
Yeah. Just something, a nugget that's like when you think of communication and bettering yourself in communication or how you communicate, what's something that kind of stands out in your life or your experiences?
I'm trying to think of a specific example, but oftentimes when I run into something like communicating with like over phone, email, or even in person, right? Sometimes I realize that, especially if it's a larger group, a lot of the issues that arise, it's really just because people aren't communicating. They could be communicating a lot, but they're not communicating the right things. A lot of times you assume that the person knows when they might know, and then it kind of leads to a lot of confusion. And then also, my role here right now is anything China right now, so I'm also dealing with people in China and also seeing the 2 different cultures, balancing out the communication styles between those, which is also very interesting. So, Brian, by the way.
Brian, relations with China. and different aspects of communicating long distance, remotely, electronically. And are you on conference calls? What's the time difference over there?
12 hours. In Rotterdam, 6 hours, so it's like perfect, easy to calculate.
Do you ever have to be on calls at like midnight our time?
So if it's a call with Rotterdam and China, it's better for our morning, because in Rotterdam's afternoon, China's night. Whereas if it was up my night, it's like 5 a.m. in Rotterdam. It doesn't work out.
Well, we're glad you're here. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm part of the Mendix organization, and I run some of our strategic alliance relationships here. My little anecdote here about communication, my background, I come from a management consulting background, so working with lots of different clients and lots of different people of differing tenure and experience levels. And I think one thing that always stood out to me is that the way that people communicate and the presence that they have, I always felt had a disproportionate impact on my perception of them and their skills and what they could bring to the table. And so that's something that always stood in my mind and makes me think that communication is a really important thing to work on. And then in my role here, I'm obviously interfacing with similar partners and people at the same type of consulting firms. And so similarly, I'm very conscious of communication and just think it's a great thing to continue to improve on.
You know, that was a great anecdote or mention that you made about how your vision of somebody and their presence differs from the perception you have, or maybe you can reword it differently. So can you give an example of that? You don't need to name specifics or names or anything like that, but like, what do you mean when you say that? Like, so I'll throw it out there, you tell me if I'm way off base or not, but like somebody is a senior VP and they have great presence in that role, but then you get to know them and they're not congruent, or they don't align, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I think I'm often thinking about first impressions, and so I use the word disproportionate, where it feels like there's so many elements that go into your understanding of the relationship that you're building with someone. But for me, when I see someone in a first impression, their communication skills seem to me to have a disproportionate impact on kind of what my perception is of them. And so the way that I think about it for myself is I'm often in the room with people who are more senior or typically always male, older. And so how can you use communication as a way to overcome some of the expectations or preconceived notions that people may have of you in your favor?
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's where, by the way, and you weren't here for this, we just did a quick exercise before lunch about that really drew out making a connection, having connection points with people that you're building a relationship with, working with, and that would help with what you're alluding to right there. Having some kind of a connection that you identify and then you work on for that.
Yep.
Good. Okay, is there anybody else? Oh, yeah, probably. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Carly. I work here at Mendix too. And with how I kind of look at communications is I'm at the front desk. And every day we have people coming in, we have candidates, people interviewing, and it's kind of interesting to me to see the people that will actually tell me like what they're here for. They're kind of just sit back and like almost have to like me kind of ask them what they're doing or like where they're going. And I think there's a huge difference when someone is actually more verbal and communicating what they're doing here. Kind of just makes it more organized. And for me too, if I know when people are coming in, because I've been communicating with my teammates and whatnot, it just makes Mendix look more put together, gives them better looks. We actually know if someone comes in, I actually don't know where you're going because no one told me. So I think it's just important to have good communications within the company.
Yeah, big time. And I have to say a couple things. The first time here, Sarah, you were running that panel, and you were so friendly. You were at the door greeting people, and I'm not just saying this. I mean, I wouldn't say nothing if it didn't matter. Sometimes you go to companies and offices, and the person in that role, like they could give they're just not engaged at all. And that was not in fact, you talked to me a little additionally and said you should meet Sarah after I told you who I am, what I do. And I don't know that I would have made a point to talk to her if you didn't say that.
Well, I'm glad it worked out.
We might all be sitting here right now because of that. I think so. So,
Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks. Cool. All right, so I'm going to ask, before we get to our next guest speaker, coach, is I'd like for somebody to come up, and I know out of this big group here, there's going to be at least one or two brave souls who will be open to doing this, but I'd like for somebody to come up and take 1 minute and share a trip that you took, just a little bit about where you went, and something about that trip that enlightened or opened your eyes to something that you had never known before or felt or understood before. Okay, so I didn't really articulate that well, but you can describe or mention a trip that you took, where you went, and then something on that trip that happened that taught you something that you never knew before or understood. Something a little bit new and different in your life. Okay, so who would like to come up and share that? I knew that. Come on.
This is so exciting. So a trip that I went on recently was actually to Philadelphia. I have gone back and forth there a couple of times, but in this last trip that I went, I really got an understanding of what it means to connect with people, like authentically, genuinely, on a human level, connect in a way that really had me sitting in gratitude for being within the community that I was in. I really got a sense of what it meant to be a part of something larger and to be able to communicate with other people in a way that allowed me to access emotion and be able to really get a closeness that I hadn't gotten before, especially with like people I didn't even really know, but to really be able to build relationships, like authentic relationships where there's communication, there's trust, there's authenticity, there's acceptance, all of that, like all those wonderful things is something that I learned just being within the space that I had been in the community that I had found myself in this trip that I had taken.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. How about one more person? One more person come up and share a trip and something like that. Great.
Love it. I'm going a little off top, but it's so I went on a family vacation with my parents and sister in 2011 to Ireland. So we did a guided tour where the bus driver literally picked up our whole group and took us around. So we stayed in different hotels and so forth. And it was so much fun. I learned, so Irish people are just like hilarious. It doesn't matter how old they are, what they do. It's just like so fun. But I'm realizing now, recently, it hit me the connection of what I learned from that experience. So here, this bus driver, he picked us up, he was with us the whole way, but then along the way, we went and we kind of spent time with other experts. So we went to like a cheese making place, we went to a sheep farm, and there were always these other people that came out and would share more in depth about that particular topic, but there was always this constant driver with us, and we built a bond with him. And so I've learned that in my current role in kind of working relationships, that I feel like I'm playing kind of the bus driver, that I'm being the constant for a lot of my fellow coworkers, especially in our onboarding program. So for new people, which Brian just recently went through this onboarding program, that I'm kind of the bus driver, but then pulling in those experts and kind of trusting them to do the deep dive on these different topics. So while it was a few years ago, and it was more of just, I enjoyed the scenery and the food and the people, the lesson has come now 8 years later, and I'm kind of thinking about how that, I'm kind of emulating that in my current role.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. So I think most of you today are meeting Sabrina for the first time, myself not included. But do any of the Mendix employees, did any of you know any of that story from Sarah before? Have you heard any of that before? Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind, and one of the reasons I like to do that and get you thinking about, and a trip is a good one because it usually pulls out a personal experience and a story and something that impacts and affects us in a certain way, is, again, it goes back to connecting with other people. And this can work both ways too, is be in touch. with these things that matter in your life. And for those of you who are here with us this morning, remember we're talking a little bit about the meaning and the purpose that we want in our life and the direction that we want to go as a person. What stuff matters to us. And when we can naturally, obviously you don't want to go to an event, a networking event, or in a formalized meeting at work and shove this stuff in people's faces necessarily. There's always a time and a place. But think about these very personal stories and experiences. I talked to Sabrina not long ago. It's the recent trip to Philly after you came back from that. Remember how powerful that was? You kept sharing that with me, and that made an impression. And for Sarah, as she shared more and more of that story,